Welcome back to Scoundrels Inc., another Star Wars podcast. I am Frank Janish, and this week I am here with Brandon Hanna to talk about The Bad Batch Season 3, Episode 4, A Different Approach, along with some other news tidbits that we'll get into later in the show. But Brandon, didn't see you last week. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm all caught up on The Bad Batch. Crosshair is back and better than ever. I always love a good like redemption arc, you know, like my
You don't
whole
think
life.
we have too many of those?
But like, I mean, I guess that's why I like Star Wars. I don't know.
I know. I kid,
But you know,
there's
it's
some
like,
people. Yeah.
you know, my whole life I've always liked guys, even though Crosshair didn't like start out as a villain, like in the Bad Batch he kind of has, right? In the framing of like this like story. So I always like it when like a person starts off bad and then realizes the error of their ways and becomes good at the end. And I feel like we're getting that kind with like a thing with like Crosshair, you know?
Yeah, we'll definitely have to talk about how this last episode ended and what
Hmm.
could happen going forward. But if you're watching this or listening to this and you're on the YouTubes or the podcast feed and you haven't hit subscribe to the YouTube channel, to the podcast feed. Really help us out. Leave a like and a comment wherever you can. We also have social medias. We have Twitter, or the app formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, Threads, TikTok. Brandon, we need a Threads update. How's Threads looking over there?
Threads is great, you know. It's just like Twitter, but
just like
for
just like
people.
Twitter, but a lot less chaotic, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I would say I don't know. I don't want to say the A word because but the algae rhythm, the Don
Yeah.
Cheadle, the Don
Yeah, yeah.
Cheadle of it all. You know, it's I don't know if it has been quite figured out yet. So, but it seems to
Okay.
be a little more narrow focused. You know, than X is all over the place.
Yeah, it's wild times in the social media landscape,
Hmm.
and there's only so much I can put up with X/Twitter. It's I'm on Instagram more these days. That's a lot more easier for me. But we're not here to talk about social media platforms. We're here to talk about The Bad Batch, Season 3, Episode 4, A Different Approach. And Brand, I just want to get your overall
Hmm.
thoughts, really, I think, from the premiere, the first 3 episodes, and then we'll get into this episode. But yeah, talk to me about the premiere episodes, the first 3, and what
Hmm.
you took away from it, and how do you think, and like what did it set up in your mind of how the season might go?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we're moving pretty fast. I'm getting like Mandalorian season 3 vibes, or like at the end of season 2, like Grogu goes off with Luke, and then season 3 he's just like back with Din. It's the same thing. Like end of season 2, Omega is like kidnapped. She's living on Mount Tantus, and it's like, all right, now we're back. Like she escapes.
Yeah, but didn't you see the tick marks in the wall to demonstrate the passage of time?
Yeah, but I didn't get to experience that passage of time. And I thought it would be more. I don't know. I was like, because I saw some like screenshots like of that same thing before I watched the episode, and so I thought like she was gonna like grow up on Mount Tantus, and we were gonna have
Oh,
like a
like
major,
grow up.
yeah, like a
Yeah,
major time jump where like maybe not she's like a full grown adult, but like a like
like a
18 or
year.
something. Yeah, I don't know.
Because I think it was only like 2 or 3 months
Hmm.
was what the tally looked like.
Yeah,
But
I was thinking years were gonna go by. Um,
that would have
but
been
yeah.
wild.
So
That would have
yeah,
been crazy.
but yeah, I get like I mean, the Bad Batch has always been like a fast paced show. I feel like these animated shows are more fast paced because of the shorter runtime, and it's not necessarily like geared towards kids, but it's kid friendly. So it's like those types of stories typically tend to move, I think, a little faster because you want to keep people's attention spans. And like I said, you only got like 20 something minutes to tell each individual story. So I get it. But yeah, it's all moving pretty quickly. But I'm, happy to see where things go. I'm like, okay, well, I was thinking about like, okay, we're only talking about the first 3 episodes right now. What do I say?
Yeah.
But no, the Mount Tanta stuff is cool because, um, yeah, I immediately knew that the emperor was gonna show up. Like, oh, we have a visitor. I wonder who that could be. Um,
Right.
so it's great to like see him and get confirmation that Project Necromancer is, basically cloning Palpatine. Um, whereas like
Right.
again, that was first mentioned in the Mandalorian, and we knew that like in that time period, like General Hux's daddy is spearheading that program. Um, and we didn't quite know what that meant. Like we had some ideas. It ended up being what we all thought it was, but you never know with Star Wars, like what all these different code names mean.
Yeah, like that's the interesting part about this whole Project Necromancer and all that
Hmm.
is within the episodes and the shows, they don't explicitly come out and say, "Yeah, we're trying to clone Palpatine," and we all know that's what's happening. So,
Hmm.
I mean that's the only logical thing. I mean, Gideon's thing was somewhat the same but different. It was more of his own personal
Yeah, it's like
project.
yeah, not to cut you off, but it's like he caught wind of Project Necromancer and he was like, "Oh, cloning force sensitive or putting like M counts into like people who don't are not naturally force sensitive. What can I do with that technology?"
It's like Zuckerberg and the Winklevoss twins. It's like Zuckerberg was like, "Hey, that's a pretty good idea. What if I start my own website called the Facebook and not Harvard Connect?" I think that's what it was called, the
Mhm,
Winklevoss twins. And so you kind of like took the same idea, but then made a few slight adjustments so
mhm.
that it was his name on it, like Gideon. So basically, what I'm saying is Moff Gideon is the Mark Zuckerberg of the Star Wars universe, although not quite nearly as successful as Zuckerberg.
No.
Not nearly. He doesn't have the subscriber count that Zuck does have on Facebook. Anyways, yeah, what do you think about like the meeting between Hemlock and
Mhm.
Palpatine and like their kind of their dialogue?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like all this like fanfare, all these like stormtroopers like standing at attention for like what seemed like a 1 hour visit, and they were just like, "We don't know how long he's gonna be
Yeah.
here." Like I feel like this could have been like a Skype call or something. Like
Yeah,
hey,
yeah,
like put
like
the
a
phone
virtual
around.
tour.
Yeah,
Yeah,
look, there's the clones. Like, and
yeah,
we're coming close. Look at the security. I had to go through so many ray shields. Um, but yeah, it's interesting because like on one hand like Hemlock, I think this was maybe in episode 4 but whatever, where he was like, I have the disposal of the whole empire to like find
yeah.
these people. um but at the same time I'm like, well, isn't Palpatine going to be like upset that you like let them escape in the first place though? um
What Daddy doesn't know won't hurt him,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, Darth Vader was choking people out for much less, and the Emperor is not as forgiving as he is.
Right.
That was a bad impression. But yeah, I do like just the whole idea of like Mount Tantus and Project Necromancer, and I like what it does for the sequels. Because up until that, up until now, or we've had all these unanswered questions about like, okay, what is
Yeah.
Snoke? Like, is Snoke like a puppet of Palpatine? Is he like a clone of Palpatine that is just like almost like an apprentice, but he's not like an actual Sith? And it's like, what's the deal with all that? How did he become the leader of the First Order? And it's starting to feel like to me like there were a select few people like the Huxes and so on, like that they know that like Snoke is like a failed clone of Palpatine. They're like, all right, like we cloned Palpatine. He's really, really ugly now, but he can use the Force. So let's make him our leader. you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
for the time being. Like it was all like this Imperial Shadow Council seems to all be like aware of this plan, because even then like it was another in the Mandalorian in that meeting there was another comment saying like, oh well, we need like a leader until they figure out Project Necromancer, until like we successfully clone Palpatine and he could lead us again in some capacity. So it's interesting. It like kind of like sets up the whole dynamic of how the First Order as we know it came to be. Um, yeah.
But I do still have like questions in terms of Snoke though, because
Hmm.
is Snoke actually a byproduct of Project Necromancer, or because like eventually like the operation in some
Hmm.
form shifts to Exegol because that's where
Yeah.
Palpatine ends up, right? Being, and so was Project Necromancer, responsible for Snoke, or was whatever was happening on Exegol,
I feel
mostly I mean, I think that seems like, because
yeah.
we've seen like the vat of like Snoke in there, whatever. So I wonder how successful Project Necromancer actually becomes in terms of producing a viable clone, i.e., Snoke or some other being, or like Palpatine's quote unquote kid, and and that's
Hmm.
how we get Rey. So I wonder like how far Project Necromancer actually gets, and when does it split, basically, when does Project
Hmm.
Necromancer get relocated to Exegol, much in the same way Oppenheimer relocates to the Los
Yeah.
Alamos and all of that.
Yeah, I do think I do think Snoke is a byproduct of Project Necromancer, and I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the Bad Batch, like Mount Tantus is fully compromised, and like a hologram of Palpatine shows up to what's his name? You just said it, the main scientist.
Oh, Hemlock.
Hemlock, yeah, hologram of Palpatine shows up to Hemlock, and he's like, "We're moving operations of Project Necromancer to Exegol." Like that's
Well, I
where
mean,
they,
they've kind
you
of
know.
alluded to the precedent that like once they're done in a spot,
Hmm.
they nuke it, right? They just
Yeah.
they just decimate it. So I think you're right that eventually at the end of this series,
Hmm.
I think a victory for the Bad Batch would be the destruction of Mount Tantus, and that would be by the Batch exposing what's happening on
Hmm.
Tantus, or at least leaking some information, getting out into the galaxy. But then the Empire coming in and just nuking the entire mountain and decimating it to erase any kind of evidence, if you will, of like
Hmm.
what they were doing there, and then maybe that gets moved to another location. Not Exegol at this point, because obviously once we get to Mandalorian, they have the Shadow Council and all that. So some form of that. I don't know. I don't know how they have multiple sites, because they had something on Navarro, or at least Gideon did.
Hmm.
But does that even? I don't know. It's interesting how the whole project and its work spans from this time period all the way through Mandalorian up into the sequel trilogy. So it's an interesting thing, and yeah, it does tie in the sequels a little bit better. It plants the seeds, because I don't know if this was, I think this might have been, if you share the same opinion, that it wasn't necessarily the fact that Palpatine came back. It was more about the fact that it was just like boom, he's back, and it's like, wait, how did that?
Hmm.
Wait, what? And you can say what you want about the decision by the powers that be at Lucasfilm and why they decided on Palpatine, but now, much like the Clone Wars animated series did, how it helped elevate the prequels and giving more context and fleshing out the relationships between Obi-Wan and Anakin and Padme, and etc., that the Bad Batch is doing in part what the Clone Wars did, for the prequels, and then Bad Batch for the sequel trilogy, in terms of at least Palpatine in that regard.
Hmm.
Um, is that how you see it, or do you see it differently?
Yeah, no, that's we're definitely seeing that. It's like an interesting vessel for them to do it with the Bad Batch, but at the same time, it does make sense because of the cloning aspect and because of like Clone Force 99 or whatever they were called.
Yeah.
Uh these are a special group of clones, and especially Omega being with them, and the things that make Omega special. Obviously, I think we're seeing like Omega might be force sensitive, or at the very least, she has the genetic makeup where you can basically give her the force through science. Well, something to that effect.
Yeah,
We saw
that's
the
really, that part of the quote unquote Star Wars science is a little
yeah.
nebulous at this point, I feel like.
Hmm. Yeah, because I mean that experiment, it seemed like they were able to successfully transfer an M count into her blood, is what they said. So,
Yeah. So
um,
I guess in theory,
yeah.
if instead of putting a bunch of midichlorians into a vial of blood, you put into an actual bean, with a lot more blood. And
Uh-huh.
I mean, could you imagine if here's a wild theory that I don't think will come true, but I mean, if Hemlock does in fact capture Omega and then pumps her full of midichlorians, and she's able to withstand it, and the M count isn't degraded
Mhm.
like it has in other experiments, and then she walks out of Tantus with like force powers, kind of like it's almost as if she's like 11 from Stranger Things. She has experiments done to her, and all of a sudden now she's walking out of there with powers and
Mhm.
and cracking people's necks as she walks out of there with a shaved head. Um, that would be wild.
Yeah, I don't know what they're gonna do. I almost like it almost seems like too messed up because this is like still kind of a kids show, but like
Yeah,
if
yeah.
Omega died at the end of the series and like maybe we
Ugh.
see the Bad Batch like start to form like the path as like a safe like underground railroad type thing that we saw like Obi-Wan Kenobi to like save other force sensitive kids because like in honor of Omega or something like that. That
Yeah.
would be an interesting connection, but that's kind of
I
dark.
mean, could you imagine in this show if they wrote in a
Mm.
way that Omega makes the ultimate sacrifice? I don't know that Star Wars could do. I don't know that
I
they.
mean, yeah. I mean, it seems messed up for a kids show, but then also you look at the Clone Wars and it does end with like Order 66, right?
I mean,
and and
true.
and your main character turning to the dark side. So, like the show,
And they've talked about
yeah.
kidnapping. I mean, the First Order kidnapped a bunch of kids and then indoctrinated
Mhm.
them, or at least programmed them in some way to be a First Order, troopers and stuff like that. So there has been some dark stuff happening, but it's always been in like kind of like the abstract. You didn't see it, you just heard about it, and you're like, that's kind of messed up. And then, I mean, lest we forget, Ahsoka was a child soldier. We just forget about it because it's animated. But then you watch Ahsoka, and then you go to the flashback, and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. She was just like a 15-year-old kid in a galactic war.
Mhm.
So uh, I don't know. There's a lot of different ways they can go about things. But let's get into this week's episode.
Mhm.
A different approach with Crosshair and Omega. Um, Escaping Tantus. And what did you think of Crosshair's dynamic with Omega, given how he was in the first couple of episodes of the season and how he was here with Omega
Mhm.
on the escape?
Yeah, no, I really like their back and forth. Like they're on the same team, and you see like even at one point, Crosshair has the opportunity to just leave on his own if he wanted to,
Hmm.
and he sticks with Omega instead. And yeah, it's nice to see like I'm obviously like whatever the Empire did to him, like his hand is like still twitching, and clearly I think they were trying to like up his M count or something, and it kind of isn't
Maybe.
isn't working. But
Well, they did say Hemlock did say at the end of the episode
mhm,
that they tried him as a sample and they discarded
yeah,
him because it didn't work. So
mhm,
I don't know that they did it physically on him, but they
yeah,
certainly tested his blood.
yeah. I mean, they're doing something to him. So, but other than that, like he's kind of like not just back to his old self, but he's at a point of like growth where like he's before like between like the inhibitor chip and the imperial propaganda and all that, he wasn't thinking clearly, but now I think he is like thinking fully like under his own accord and is choosing to grow as a person and stick with Omega. And I like that dynamic, and I like how like he just wants to kill everybody, and then she's like, "No, there's other ways
Yeah.
to do it." And then at the end of the episode, she's like, "All right, we'll do it your way." And he's like,
Kinda
"Fine."
like,
He's like,
John
"Finally."
Connor kinda like John Connor in Terminator.
Yeah.
No killing.
Yeah,
Just
right?
just shoot him in the knee, shoot him in the leg.
That's exactly like it is like Terminator 2. That's a good
Yeah,
like
yeah.
analogy. Yeah, and then he's like, "Oh, you brought the hound." We're like, I actually agreed with him. It's like they're gonna be looking for like an adult male and a kid and Batcher. Like, and they're just
Yeah.
walking around like the city, like on the same planet where there was the crash ship that is the same one. Like
Right,
I'm like,
right.
he could have been a little more incognito, I think, but
Yeah, yeah.
they
Yeah,
were
but,
asking to get caught.
but, right now we don't have Gonki, so we have to have Badger. We
Mm.
have to have a sidekick of sorts, for now. Can't wait to see Badger meet Gonki. That's gonna be
Mhm.
one hell of a meeting that I can't wait to see happen. Um, but yeah, I thought like the dynamic between Crosshair and Omega has come. It's like come such a long way. I mean, like I feel like in those first few episodes, you see Omega always trying to go visit Crosshair
Mhm.
in his cell and give him some sort of update. And she was always like optimistic and always working the problem, trying to figure out how to get out of there. When all it really took was Nala say to be like, here's a data pad, get out of here, kid.
Yeah.
And so, and like the whole sequence really was so fun when they escaped. Um, but now with, uh, you know, the fact that Hemlock is like, we need to capture her. Now that he knows like Omega is like the key to it all, it's gonna be
Mhm.
really fascinating to see um, who pops up because obviously in the trailers we saw Cad Bane, we saw Fennec Shand. I think someone on our reaction video, which you can watch by the way on our YouTube channel that I did. I think someone commented the fact that who's going to show up to try and like hunt down like Omega, who's and it could be Cad Bane, could be Fennec Shand. Hemlock,
Mhm.
as you said earlier, he has the full disposal of the Empire's assets and whatnot, and then and I'm assuming that means the bankroll as well, and hiring a bunch of bounty hunters to go find Omega. I mean, that's what you would do at this point in the galaxy. So that could lead to some interesting encounters and meetings between
Mhm.
certain types of characters. So I'm really and but so actually now just let's just jump to the end of this episode where Crosshair and Omega finally rendezvous with Hunter and Wrecker. What was your take on this meeting between Omega and everyone, and then obviously
Mhm.
Crosshair stepping down um, off the ship?
No, I really liked it, and I really the whole time I was on the edge of my seat waiting to see what the reaction to Crosshair was gonna be, if it was gonna be, like, standoffish, which I think is what it ultimately was, where they were like, "Okay, like, he helped her, but we're still kinda pissed at him."
Yeah,
And or if they were just going to, like, embrace him and let, like, bygones be got bygones, I don't know. I guess we'll see in the next episode, but I thought that was a nice moment, and, to touch on all that what we were talking about a moment ago. I talked about this a little bit with season two, but I really like what this show has to say thematically about um like there's like a morality that like Omega brings to things, like where she sees things through the mind of a child wanting to always do the right thing, and the show really makes a point to say like making decisions only based on logic will only get you so far, and sometimes you have to
hmm
do things simply because it's the right thing to do. And we see that, and we see characters learning this lesson, like we see Crosshair learning this lesson, and we see people like Hemlock who are never going to learn this lesson. Like when Batcher escaped, Hemlock was like, well, you domesticated him, and because of that he's now weak and he's never going to survive out in the wild. And Batcher proved Hemlock wrong. He not only survived out in the wild, but he helped Omega and Crosshair escape.
yeah,
And we see, Omega is always like, and Omega making the decision to save Batcher and Crosshair and not just escape on her own, she ended up needing both Batcher and Crosshair to escape at all. And wanting to go save Batcher at the end of this episode ended up being a better decision than just bribing your way onto the a transport, because were, even though there was a huge battle that ensued, they were able to get their own ship where they were able to send
Yeah.
a coded message to Wrecker and Hunter. So, yeah, that's just like something I picked up on that I think really
Yeah,
goes hand in
definitely.
hand with like the growth of Crosshair in particular, and just what this show is all about.
I did want to comment real quick on Omega being like, I'm about to like hustle these MFers
Yeah.
in here. I'm about to take all their money. Don't worry, Crosshair. This is a different approach. You don't have to go,
Yeah.
pew pew pew. I'm gonna play this game and then we'll win the money that way. Yeah, I also did really want to comment too on like just like the Imperial officers that the show has introduced
Mhm.
throughout the series as like one-off villain type of like for like at least an episode or two, whatever. I go back to that last season with Crosshair. What was it called? The Outpost, I think
Mhm.
was the name of the episode where he ends up shooting that one officer because like the supplies and all that stuff, whatever it was. But like that one officer, I forget his name too, but I was like at that. I remember that episode. I was rooting for Crosshair to like kill this Imperial
Yeah.
officer, which I shouldn't really feel that way, but that's how good of a job the show writes their villain, quote unquote, villain of the week, Imperial
Mhm.
officer villain of the week type of characters. And they do a really good job in this show introducing these imperial officers that are just absolute d-bags and that you just can't wait for them to get their comeuppance in any sort of way. And this episode had another one of them where he like sits down across from Omega and is like, I'm a grown ass man, how about a real challenge, little kid? It's just like, what? Like that's how like just like evil this dude
Mhm.
is. He's like, I'm about to take down this little kid, and then even if I lose all my money to you, I'm gonna steal it back from you because we're the empire and we can do whatever we want, that sort of thing. So I thought
Mhm.
that was great from this episode. But where they leave this episode with Crosshair on one side and Omega, Hunter, and Wrecker on the other, it will be interesting to see what the reconciliation is like between all of them. I
Mhm.
kind of think Wrecker will be like, "All right, yeah, you kind of messed up a little bit, but you're back now, and you helped Omega, so all right, we're good." Hunter, I think, might be a little more reserved, and
Mhm.
then we still have yet to see Echo or like Rex or Cody or anybody else like that in the season. I wonder what their response to Crosshair might be. Um, so that'll be a thing. Hope eventually. I think, but it's gonna be interesting. And like next week's episode is titled "The Return." A lot of people were surmising, oh, could that be Asajj Ventress, returning? No, I think it's more about Crosshair returning and how they're going to deal with the fallout of his actions and the things that he's done. And we'll see what happens there. And I'm curious if the return is in regard in or was not in regards, but um, what's the word I'm looking for in relation to Crosshair returning. But the way some of these first few episodes have gone, you spend one whole episode, like episode one, you spend all of it with Omega and Crosshair and Tanta's dad's side of the story. Then the second episode was with Wrecker and Hunter and the clones they found, and like that aspect of the story. The third episode was more Omega Crosshair and a little bit of Hunter Wrecker, I think, right? And then this one was basically all Crosshair and Omega. I wonder if the next episode, is dealing just with the reunion here, or will it start eventually going back and forth between both stories in terms of will we get more on Tantus? Will we,
Mhm.
because Hemlock, he's on the hunt now, and are we going to see kind of like what he's up to in terms of trying to find Omega, or will they do like these more isolated, quote unquote, isolated stories with a certain group of characters? And because, as you talked about, these shows move so quickly because of the runtime, you kind of have to spend 15 to 20-minute chunks with a certain part of a story to kind of like make it a fleshed out story, if you will, within the
Mhm.
time frame. And then you throw in a little bit of the other side, I guess. That seems to maybe be the formula here. So I'm looking forward to next week's episode just to see how they all, how do they get to a place where everything is okay? Because I think eventually that has to happen. Um, that just seems like how the story would go. And if you've seen the trailers, Crosshairs and more than you can at least see his rifle. I think in a couple shots, and you're like, he's with them. But yeah, any final thoughts on this week's episode, Brandon?
Um, I mean, just to like I build on what I was saying like earlier, I was just like the gears were turning a little bit. Like uh that Crosshair also like he's like right sometimes like in this relationship with like Omega, right? Like doing things his way at the end of the episode like ended up paying off, but like maybe
Right.
if they stormed the transport earlier in the episode it wouldn't have worked. So there's a lot to say about like teamwork and relationships, and then I'm interested to see how that carries over like into like being back with like Hunter and Wrecker, and if that dynamic will continue. Like if like because Crosshair and Omega had like a good thing going, but like is it going to be uh as easy of a relationship now with Hunter and Wrecker, back in the mix? Are we going to see like a lot of conflict, difficulty, and like decision making going forward? There's like a lot of possibilities that opens up, I think.
Yeah, and I think will Crosshair take a different approach this time around, as opposed to
Hmm.
maybe in the past, where if it was old Crosshair, I'd be like, get over it, man, it happened, don't worry, let's just whatever.
Hmm.
But maybe this time around, he's like, all right, yeah, let's deal with it. So
he
who
he
knows?
goes, he just goes, I know, I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh, that
Uh,
Crosshair impersonation is killing me.
I love
Um,
I love the Crosshair voice.
yeah, you really do. Before we wrap up
Hmm.
here, let's get into some news that has dropped over the past few weeks. I want to get into some of this Acolyte
Hmm.
news, which is only a little bit, but then there's a decent chunk of Star Wars gaming news that we'll get into a little bit. But first off, Acolyte news. I don't know if you saw this, Brandon, but on Collider they had an exclusive in terms of a release date for the Acolyte. They say June 5th. Lucasfilm, Disney did not refute that, but they didn't confirm it either. Um, that would be June 5th is not that far away,
No.
and we don't even have a trailer yet. So what are your thoughts on the release date if
Mm.
that in fact is true?
Well, I've seen the cell phone filmed trailer.
Have you?
I don't know if I can say that. I'll get in trouble. But
I mean, it
yeah.
was. I mean, they showed it some at Celebration,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
but so yeah, it's out there.
Yeah, I don't know. I hope we get it soon. It seems like a really interesting show. Um, but yeah, basically 3 months away. So an announcement and a trailer would be nice.
It would be nice. At least I would love just for at least I don't need a trailer right now. I mean, I'll
Mhm.
take it. But if they just said, "Yeah, Acolyte coming out in June." Awesome. And then let's see, we're going into March now.
Mhm.
If you wait, so let's say we get the announcement in March, hey, June 5th, Acolyte, and then April or May, you get a trailer, you know, um, that'd be cool. Hopefully, I don't. I'm really looking. I hope it's coming out in June because I think it was originally supposed to come out at the end of last year and then got pushed because of the strikes and stuff like that. So hopefully they were further along in the post production process and they can pump it out in June because they do have a lot of. I mean, they still have to put out Skeleton Crew and Andor, Tales of the Jedi. I know is in the works, so they have all these shows still kind of
Mhm.
in waiting, and hopefully June would be great, because that'd be a great way to spend the summer discussing Acolyte. Um, Hopefully that works out. Okay, so let's get into some gaming news to wrap up the show here this week. Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection was announced, and that's going to be released in a couple weeks on March 14th. That's the original Battlefront and Battlefront 2 from 2004 and 2005. Did you play these games on PlayStation, Brandon? Any one of them?
Oh yes, both of them.
Both
Many,
of them?
many, many hours.
Hell
Actually,
yeah.
like recently, like a week or two before this announcement, I was playing it with a friend on a Battlefront 2 specifically. And so that was pretty funny timing, but yeah. Uh,
Battlefront 2 was my game that I played. I didn't so much
yeah.
play the first one, but Battlefront 2, I played that one a ton.
Oh
Love
yeah.
that game. Because like we're post Revenge of the Sith here now, and it's like what else are you gonna play? I mean, there was, I think Star Wars Galaxies was out, and
Mhm.
I love that game. I know it's still out there, but it's hard to like get, you know, there's a particular way you got to way you have to go about things to get that on your computer again, and get plugged into that. But Battlefront 2, it was just so much fun. Like I could play.
Still
It
is.
was yeah. It was like to me, it's like the golden eye of N64. It was
Mhm.
like Battlefront 2 for me, at least in terms of being a Star Wars fan. Battlefront 2 was my golden eye.
Mhm.
So I was really surprised when they announced that they're releasing this as a classic collection. I think PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Series X, S, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think it's going to be, in terms of multiplayer, it's not going to be. There's no cross play through different consoles,
Mhm.
um, between like Xbox, PC, and PlayStation. But I do think I think I did read that it's cross generation play. So PS4, PS5 can play multiplayer. Xbox One, Xbox
Interesting.
XS, and maybe PC can play all together.
Mhm.
Um, but either way, I think I might have to pick this thing up. Just to be able to play it again would be awesome.
Yeah, no, it's an absolute like blast. I definitely got to go back to my buddy's place and play it some more because
Yeah, you,
I
you
don't-
have a PS4 or you have a
I
PS4?
I have a PS4, and I
Okay.
think I think I have actually. Well, here's the thing: I think I have Battlefront 2 on PS2, but I don't have a PS2, but I have the game, and I and I also have Battlefront 2 on PSP, but I lost my PSP charger,
Oh my god.
so
Well,
I
you go on
can't play that
eBay, get
either.
yourself a PSP charger.
But
That's what you
my
gotta do.
buddy, like, just downloaded it on, like, an emulator at his
Yeah.
on his computer, so
Well, another game that's coming out, that's out right now actually, is Star Wars Dark Forces Remaster, and I've been looking at kind of the write-ups, the articles on this thing, and I never played Dark Forces. I don't know if you did,
mm,
Brandon. No.
I
It's-
I don't think I've played it. I'm vaguely familiar with it.
yeah, I'm familiar with it, but I
I
never
think
played it.
I feel like I've maybe been to, like, my, like, buddy's house, like, back in the day, like, growing up. Anyway, like, was this on the PC?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, like, I think my old friend that I grew up with used to play it on the PC, and I would, like, go to his house, but it's like a vague, distant memory.
yeah. Because Dark Forces has Kyle Katarn, right?
Mm,
So that's where he stems from, and from everything I'm hearing from this remaster is great. Basically, it's the same exact game. They just kind of upres the graphics a little bit, and they've added in a level that was previously promoted but was never actually in the game. I think it takes place on the Star Destroyer, the Avenger, and um, I think they promoted it when the game was first coming out, but
mhm,
it never made it into the actual game. And so there's like a bonus level, I think, is how they classified on the remaster, that you can go ahead and play that. And then I think also I read that in terms of the soundtrack, it's like it's music, but then like there's the original version, like the MIDI music soundtrack, so you can switch back and forth between
mhm.
which version of soundtrack you want to listen to. So you can get the full original soundtrack experience, or you can get the quote unquote updated version, if you will. But from the things I've been seeing, the Dark Forces remaster is very, very good in terms of how they were able to bring it to modern consoles and PC for today's gamers. Might have to check that one out as well, because why the hell not? Why the hell
Yeah.
not? Some other news here before we wrap it up. There was that Mandalorian FPS first-person shooter game that was rumored about a few weeks ago. Actually, even earlier this year, there was a report that Respawn was working on a first-person shooter, but they didn't know what kind of game it was going to be, like what property it was going to be, what IP. But then a few weeks ago, it was reported that Respawn was working on a Mandalorian first-person shooter game, and then a couple of days ago, Respawn says, "Yeah, we're no longer working on that. That's canceled, but we still are working on a third Star Wars Jedi game with Cal Kestis and all that." So, would you have enjoyed, Brandon? I mean, probably, right? A Mandalorian first-person shooter. I mean, you played Bounty Hunter on PS2, right?
Oh, I love Bounty Hunt. I have it down, the digital version on my PS4. I could go play it right now.
Hell yeah!
But I also do have the PS2 copy, but no PS2.
Right. I loved Bounty Hunter. One of my favorite Star Wars games of all time, and one of the best PS2 games of all time on the best console of all time, if you ask me, PS2. Anyways, but a first-person shooter, Mandalorian, as like a AAA title on a PS5 or Xbox, whatever, would have been sick as hell. And I don't know that it would have been an open world game, but still, I mean, to have a first-person shooter style game in Star Wars as a Mandalorian, whether it's actually Din Djarin or another Mandalorian, would have been cool as hell. And I don't know. I mean, I would like to think somewhere down the line they would still another company, now that EA doesn't have the exclusive rights, some other company's got to be looking at this and being like, maybe we should take a crack at it. I don't know, but I know a lot of people were disappointed that this game got canceled. So, were you in that camp, Brandon, or did you not even know about it? Because I didn't even know about it until I heard it got canceled.
Yeah, I don't even think I knew about it, but it sounds fun.
I was like, so I didn't even, as I was going through trying to write up these stories or for the news notes, I was like, I just remember hearing all like the uproar over it being canceled. I'm like, look, I'm not really super in tuned to the games industry and that side of things and all the news that comes out of there. Even if it's Star Wars, I vaguely will hear about it here and there. So when they were like, yeah, canceled, I was like, didn't even know they were making. And then I find out exactly what it's going to be. I'm like, damn, that would have been cool as hell. Anyways. So that's canceled. But another story that I came across this morning, actually, before we recorded this, was about the company that's making the KOTOR remake. Now, I think late last year it was said that it wasn't happening anymore, that it was canceled, and then another report came out saying, well, it's not actually quite dead, so I think they are still making it. But then I read this morning a news that the company Saber Interactive, developer of the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake, will leave Embracer, which I guess is their parent company. They're leaving them in a $500 million deal so that Saber Interactive will become a privately owned company, and that's coming from Bloomberg News. But Saber will also reportedly continue to work on its remake of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic following the deal. So that's good news, which Kevin was here to comment on that. But I would really love to play a remake version of Knights of the Old Republic on today's consoles, because I did go back and play last year. I did go play the first one, the OG, and I had a lot of fun doing it. I can't imagine what a remake would be like on today's consoles. So, Brandon, if there is a remake, are you interested in playing Knights of the Old Republic, or do you just want to watch Kevin's movies?
I would take a look at it. I would watch Kevin play it. you know.
There you go. Here on the channel, maybe we can,
Yeah.
he can play it,
Hmm.
and give his commentary on the differences between the original and the remake. That'd be fun. That'd
Yeah,
be fun.
there was some news I saw that the Ahmed Best was doing some performance capture
Yes,
for
yes,
something,
yeah.
and so my theory is that they're going forward with KOTOR, but they're replacing Revan with Jar Jar.
Jar Jar is actually Revan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because Revan can be anybody. That's what they like to
Mhm.
tell us. Revan can be anybody. Um,
Even a bomb
if
Gungan.
Bumbit, oh my gosh, that would be incredible. There should be at least be some sort of mod where you can make Revan into Jar Jar. That would be pretty cool. But yeah, I'm glad you brought up that Ahmed Best thing
Mhm.
because I forgot. I wanted to talk about that as well and I forgot to put it in here. But he was like in a mocap suit sort of situation
Yeah.
thing. So to me, that's almost definitely got to be something for Jar Jar, not Kelleran Beck. Because if you were Kelleran
Right.
Beck, you don't wouldn't necessarily be have to. Well, I mean, unless you're trying to like
Yeah, unless it's like a
digitally
Keller and
capture him,
yeah, like a Keller and Beck game. I don't know.
maybe
That'd be
like
cool. A Star Wars game, he plays Keller and Beck. The game's just called The Sabered Hand,
this.
and you
Oh my
just like
gosh, Brandon, yeah,
you just go around like just
it
messing up
would be. It
stormtroopers.
would be a very cool VR experience. You know how they did the
Mhm.
Vader Immortal? Like if
Yeah.
they did a Keller and Beck VR where you have to go rescue Grogu, but you got to like fight all these clones off and stuff to get to Grogu.
That'd be sick.
That would
That'd
be,
be
and
the
then you have to
yeah.
do the chase out of Coruscant, and fly
Mhm.
and stuff. That'd be a cool VR experience. But
Yeah. Maybe at, like,
th-
one point you run into Anakin and he, like, fights with Anakin in the temple but
oh my
escapes.
god,
Who's to say that didn't happen, you know?
that's true. That's true. That's true. Like the oh man, that'd be
Mhm.
sick. That'd be
That'd
sick.
be cool.
Um,
Make it happen.
yeah, so I'm leaning, and plus I think his hashtags were like Jar Jar. I
Mhm.
think, but I think
Yeah.
did he also tag Kelleran back?
I don't know.
I don't remember,
I don't remember, yeah.
but I do know one of the hashtags was Jar Jar. So my inclination was if you're getting all that digital,
Mhm.
get up pajama type of thing, you're probably I think he's probably doing some mocap for Jar Jar. What it's for exactly, I don't. Could it
The
be
Rey movie.
what if What if he's in a Tales of the Jedi,
Mhm.
story, and he's in there, and they want to capture him the way
Mm,
that
interesting.
um, maybe he's. I don't know. That would be interesting. I
Mhm.
would love to know actually a little bit more what was going on with Jar Jar in Episode 3. Like,
Mhm.
what is he like? What happens to him like psychologically
Yeah.
after the events of Attack of the Clones and what happens to the galaxy? Like, I don't think we really know. I don't know. There might be a story or two out there that I don't know about that
Mhm.
delves into it. But I'd be curious to see, like, from his point of view, what did Order 66 look like, and how does he feel in part some responsibility towards that, or I don't know. That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Last little bit of thing, not really news, but I just wanted to ask you and our viewers slash listeners if do you play Star Wars Galaxies of Hero, the mobile game app?
No, I've never played.
Okay, so I recently restarted playing this game, and I played it upon its initial launch, which was like almost 8 years ago, and I got up to like level 75, and then for whatever reason I just stopped playing for like 7 years. And then cuz I'm up here in San Francisco working, and I have some downtime, and I was like, let me let me try out this game again. And it's a good time killer. It's a kind of like a grind type of game, and you get all these characters. So I don't know if anybody else out there plays the game, but if you do, let me know your ally code, and then we can be allies on the game. And Brandon, you know who does play it? Alex.
Yeah, I was thinking, is that the game
Yeah,
that Alex plays?
yeah, that's the game that Alex plays, and I don't have his ally code. I should ask for
Mhm.
it actually. But it's a lot of ton of characters. There's a ton of characters in there. It's fun. It
Mhm.
might not be everyone's type of game because it's kind of like a grinder type of game, but where you're just like grinding for like stars and like up leveling up your characters and whatnot. It's fun. It's nice to you're in the Star Wars world and whatnot. So
Mm.
and also the game has like original Star Wars music, which is always a good time to listen, no matter what. So it's got that going for it. Yeah, so just wanted to throw that out there as we wrap up this week's episode of talking about the Bad Batch and some other Star Wars news bits. Again, if you haven't subscribed to our podcast feed or our YouTube channel, consider doing that. Hit that subscribe, hit that follow button on all our social medias. Links in the description. We have a Discord as well. You can hop in there and stay tuned for other reactions for the rest of the Bad Batch final season I'll be doing. And maybe Brandon or Kevin will pop up in one of them if they have the time, because I do have to record them at odd times just because of my work schedule and their schedules and stuff. That's why it's all a little... might be a little discombobulated for the weeks ahead. We'll see how to. We're trying to work it out. But with all that said, thanks for tuning in this week, and be sure to catch our reaction next week and our spoiler talk again as well here on the podcast feed and on the YouTube channel. Just follow that playlist, and you can get it all. Until next time, I've been Frank Janish. That was Brandon Hanna, and we'll see you all next time.
Scoundrel. Scoundrel. I like the sound of that.